Haere mai no mai, haere mai to this panel session on marine biosecurity and filling the gaps in our clean hull framework. My name is Peter Lawless and I'm the coordinator for marine biosecurity in the top of the South Island, and I'm your facilitator for today. We've got a really great group of panelists, and I'll run through in a moment how the session will run between now and 11 AM. But just in terms of overview, we know in marine biosecurity in New Zealand that the role of things stuck onto hulls and other objects is our main vector for things being distributed around the country. Having the ways of keeping hulls clean is essential. So today we're looking at the different products that might be available. What's the experience of participants? How do the scientists see it? And how does the overall national coordination work from the Ministry for Primary Industries? So please today leave your camera on so we can see you, unless something is happening that you need to turn it off for. Your microphone off so we keep the session well managed. Put your questions that you have as things go along into the chat box, and Zoe Hawkins, our technical facilitator, will pick that up and put those questions to the panel at the appropriate time. And you're also welcome to stay on after 11 if you want to. We'll still be here, Zoe and I, to have a chat with anybody that wants to talk about things. So next slide, Zoe. So we're going to have these fine panelists introduce themselves in the order that they're listed here to start with, just so you know how they fit into the system. And then they're going to get 3 minutes each to say a piece to set the scene. And then halfway through, we're going to have a panel discussion where your question will be picked up, and we'll be inviting the panelists to make their comments. So let's begin with the introductions. Mark, how do you fit in?
Yes, hi, I'm Mark Hollier. I'm the General Manager of Half Moon Bay Marina. I've been in the industry for 18 years. That's really me, really. So I've got a reasonable amount of knowledge about the industry.
Thanks, Mark. And Nigel.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Nigel Skeggs. I'm the Marina Manager at Nelson Marina. We're a council-owned facility with 590 berths and a 50-ton travel lift and hardstand facility.
Great, and thanks, Nigel. I know you've also had overseas experience, so that may come into play as well. So nice to have you here. Ollie at Cawthron.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Ollie. I'm a marine scientist specialized in biosecurity and biofouling management. I'm currently at the Cawthron Institute, and I'm the co-lead of a large marine biosecurity research program called the Marine Biosecurity Toolbox. So you asked me to sort of say a little bit about my perspective. I guess I represent the science sector on the panel. I have an interest in hull hygiene because I think it's one of the most effective ways of preventing the spread of marine pests by human activities. And I work on a bunch of projects that I think, that at least indirectly address hull hygiene that I think are important. And the one I wanted to briefly mention today is the development of antifouling or biofouling control technologies for maritime infrastructure. So the places where we keep our boats, ports and marinas, they are full of pontoons and pilings and seawalls and other sort of static surfaces.
So Ollie, I'll just cut you off at that point. I'll get you to do that part when you do your 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I'm doing the 3 minutes now. Okay.
Oh, no, that's all good. We'll come back to that. Yeah. We just want to know who's here first.
Yeah.
Greg. I need to unmute yourself, Greg.
That's Ian. My mistake.
Oh, sorry, Ian.
From Heron Construction.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone. So yeah, Ian Meikle from Heron Construction. I'm the marine manager, and we operate a fleet of 30 odd tugs, many of which go around the different ports of New Zealand and some offshore. So marine biofouling is one aspect that we are quite interested in.
Great, thanks, Ian. Glenn, hopefully I've got it right this time.
Yes, you have. You have indeed. Good morning, everybody. I'm Glenn Clough from Marine Protection Solutions. We were established in 2016. We specialise in the adhesive anti-fouling silicon-based films and the two-pot paints, and also the ultrasound for vessel hulls. So we've been doing that since 2017, and we've got about 65 vessels out there with the silicon films, and they're going exceptionally well. So
Right.
that's what we do.
Thanks, Glenn. And Marcus.
So I work for Altex Coatings, which is a New Zealand-based manufacturer of marine coating systems. So we develop and sell anti-foul systems for New Zealand, Asia Pacific, and yeah, we're always testing products to see whether they perform the way we need them in the local environment.
And Marcus has also been supporting us here in the top of the south around the various boatyards. Thanks, Marcus, for all that support in the past. Been great.
No problem.
And Eugene.
Morena, everyone. Ko Eugene Georgiadis toko ingoa. I'm a principal advisor in hazardous substances for the Environmental Protection Authority. We're interested in the protection of human health and environment associated with hazardous substances. I've also had a 13-year stint in marine biosecurity at MPI, previous to the role that I'm now in.
Yeah, great to have that breadth of experience, Eugene, and I'm hoping Eugene gives us a bit of connecting up the dots when he talks last in this panel. So let's begin. Mark, take it away.
Right. I've been asked to make a bit of a comment about boatyards and capacities and improvements to boatyards. One of the first things I'd like to cover off is last year there was a report put together about the capacity and accessibility of fallout and anti-fouling services in the top of the north. The boatyard operators in Auckland certainly don't agree with a lot of the assumptions or conclusions of that report. That is covered in some documents that I see on the Biosecurity website now. There is plenty of capacity in Auckland. It seems to have been constructed to support the landing not being closed. It's the same old story that we've always had as far as capacity goes around boatyards. There is a pinch point in the end of the year, October, November, December. The rest of the year, there's generally about 50% more capacity than what people have shown in these reports. We would all love to spread the workload through the year. And one of the things I think has come to the fore for me is a concern around the whole 6-in-1 principle that is sort of being proposed to be widened, if you like, from what it appears to me, where it was an interregional thing. Local councils now seem to be trying to push this whole thing about hull cleanliness. Where it's in conflict with what we're trying to do is it's actually working against us. We know anti-fouling paints, all the manufacturers will tell you it lasts between 12 and 24 months. So why are we trying to get people to have clean hulls or anti-foul within 6 months when the product actually lasts for a minimum of 12 months if it's properly applied? The other side of it is this whole month of cleaning boats before you leave the region. All that's potentially doing is blowing off good anti-foul because it's ablative. So as soon as you put a pressure washer on it, it's taking that paint off. It might look great when it leaves your facility, but you've actually taken part of the protection off the boat. So I think these things are really unhelpful to us. And I'd like to see people have a look at that whole philosophy. I understand it's an interregional thing, but I think somewhere along the way, there's also a disconnect that I've picked up. Northland Regional Council and their own rules now say that, or almost saying that all we have to do is have a clean hull if we go into the Northland region, and it's the marinas that are the ones that are making the rules. Well, I don't know how we got to that point, because originally, many years ago, when we started working on this little project, we worked alongside Biosecurity, and it seemed like we were in partnership. Now, what it seems to be, when I go on your websites, there's the marinas have led the rules. We almost made to like the bad cop in the 6-in-1 rule. We're trying to, it says things like, we're trying to protect our marine structures from growth. Well, that's totally untrue. And so I don't know how we got to that point, but that's where I'll end, I guess. I think that 6-in-1 is something that is unhelpful if you're trying to get people to change the cleaning of their boats, their maintenance habits to a year-round proposition. All you're doing is you're pushing it all into the end of the year. And so you're actually working against us with all that rhetoric.
Thanks, Mark. We'll pick that up in the panel discussion. Thank you very much. So, Nigel, I'm sure you'll have a view on all of that as well. Away you go.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, well, today I just want to talk a little bit about some of the issues we're having as a marina, and some of the solutions we're looking at in terms of our biofouling. So with Nelson Marina, we are, I guess, a bit of a closed market or a monopoly in a sense that we're quite isolated. We're one marina in our region, and we're quite a significant sized marina. So we have 600 vessels, and at the moment we're also, because we're a council marina, we're quite cheap. So one of the issues we're really seeing is how many vessels that we have that aren't actually moving. So 50% of our vessels haven't moved in the last year, and 20% of our vessels haven't moved in the last 3 years. And we're just starting to be used as a bit of a storage site, which means that biofouling is quite a major issue. Recently, we had Salt Ecology do a review, and this is something we try and do regularly, of our vessels, and we surveyed 523 vessels underwater. Of those, 171 had level of fouling 3 or greater. So this is quite a concern to us. But we get a lot of pushbacks from our customers saying that, well, hey, our boats aren't moving. So if our boats aren't moving, why do we need to remain anti-fouled? Can't we just leave our boats sitting here? And the other sort of pushback is, if the marina is not doing anything, i.e., for us, we've got over 10,500 meters of floating pontoons, and we're not doing anything to keep our pontoons clean. So the question that's been asked by our customers, if we're not doing anything, why should they do something, have to worry about their boats? We're trying to get around that, I guess, through education and awareness. And that's particularly important in our region, as we're sort of the centre of aquaculture. So any of our vessels moving around, particularly the Marlborough region, around the mussel farms and the salmon farms, there's a lot at stake there should marine pests be transported. So we're doing that, our education awareness, through regular newsletters and advising our customers about their fouling levels. We also inform them and work with NIWA, where we have a biannual survey looking particularly at invasive marine pests and making sure that we don't have those in the marina in the first place. And we've also introduced, we have our own underwater drone now that we're using to inspect vessels, as well as these surveys that we use with third parties like Salt Ecology. We've also just recently upgraded our license agreement, where we have put a clause into our license where boats need to keep their level of fouling low. But what we're finding is this is very subjective and quite difficult for us to decide whether that boat has broken their license or not. So we're looking at how do we make a difference? How do we change the mindset of people, and who should really pay for that? So a couple of options that we're looking at the moment, due to the fact that just putting the onus on the customer to do it isn't working, is look at including a lift, blast and return into our license agreements and license fees, where people pay for this split over 12 months, and they've already paid for a blast and return every year in their license agreement. So therefore, hopefully, that will encourage them to actually use it. The other side is looking at whether we should do this as a cost split between the council and the boat owners, where we look at doing a half price lift, blast and return each year for our customers, where the price point then doesn't become so much of a factor. But the issue with both of these also then comes down to capacity. So, you know, for us, we've got around 240 working days in the Boatyard. If we've got 600 customers, well, then we need to bring 2.5 boats out of the water every day that we're operating throughout the year just to cover that 1 year or that one lift, blast and return. So is that actually feasible? Can we work with that with our normal yard operations? And that's something that we're going through currently at the moment. So we're still in that stage where we know there's an issue. We know there's a compliance issue. We are working on that education side, but how do we take that next step and really encourage or do we enforce our customers to clean their boats, keep them clean and not to spread any marine pests?
Thanks, Nigel, and good luck with those half boats. I haven't quite see how that one works, but that's good. Great, thank you. Ollie.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier on, we just talking a little bit about the science around marine biosecurity. Our largest marine biosecurity research program, the Marine Biosecurity Toolbox, has a bunch of components that are relevant to all aspects of post-border marine biosecurity in New Zealand. We work on anti-fouling and biofouling control solutions for infrastructure, which I'll talk about in a minute. We also develop more cost-effective and sort of citizen science capable detection tools that allow us to monitor for marine pests in more remote or in more locations more cost effectively, also using participation from the public or schools. We do a lot of pathway modeling where we build sort of dynamic model-based tools that show us the maritime traffic around New Zealand that is either comprised by the aquaculture industry or the recreational boating sector or the commercial vessel industry. So we're currently nearly done with having a full model that sort of simulates maritime traffic around New Zealand, and that will help us predict the potential spread of species as they get detected in different places, so which helps with response planning. And finally, we do a lot of social science and try and work with the let's say the recreational boating community, which is 25,000 people in New Zealand or more, to understand what their motivations and values are, and their either their the barriers they face or the motivations they have with regard to hull cleanliness, because I think working with this sector also requires us understanding how they tick and what their concerns and their values are. Just briefly though, I wanted to talk about infrastructure protection. So I guess the places where we keep our vessels, ports and marinas, they, as Nigel mentioned, they're full of pontoons and pilings and seawalls and things, and that's thousands of square meters of infrastructure that is usually covered by large populations of biofouling organisms, and at times they're non-indigenous species that are included in these. And these populations are to some extent the source of the fouling that turns up on our vessels. And in an ideal world, it would be great to reduce biofouling on this infrastructure, because it would likely also reduce the rate at which hulls become colonized and the rate at which people have to maintain them. But the issue with this is that there are really no effective, environmentally benign and commercially available solutions for this yet. We know that ports and marinas are very interested in using such tools if they were available, because they are also not keen on defouling either, like Nigel has just set out. So we at the science end made some really good advances in the development of some prototype technologies that we think have good potential. One example of that is the development or the shrouding marine static infrastructure in a layer of microscopic air bubbles that acts as a barrier to biofouling development, and that at a small scale in the lab and in the field is proving very effective. And another option is the design of surfaces that don't necessarily control fouling, but that enhance the colonization by valued native species at the expense of marine pests. So offering some sort of ecosystem service. But in both cases, unfortunately, at this point, we're unable to offer the maritime industry a solution that works at large scales, and is operationally or is viable over operational timeframes. So we think that'd be it's a good avenue to pursue, and we keep working on it, and we hopefully will work something out at some point. But unfortunately, right now we're not there yet.
Great, thanks, Ollie. And I know there's a lot more in your toolbox. When we just have a think, when we get down to the panel discussion, you might be able to direct people to places they can see more of your results, because I know you've got a lot more that you're covering. So thank you. So then we're going to go across to the industry, to Heron Construction. Ian, it's your turn. Ian, we can't hear you yet.
Yep.
No, you're
Can you hear
just
me?
coming through broken.
I'm not sure why.
Oh, you're good now.
Peter.
You're good now.
Good, yeah. Okay. All right. So hello again. So biofouling is a big deal for us. Being commercial, we are in business to make money, and biofouling does cut away at the bottom line. We fully understand and accept the need for clean waters in sensitive areas around New Zealand, and we are willing to do our bit and beyond to ensure that that happens. So we have a very, very good biofouling management plan. 3 sections. First one's general, fleet wide. Second one is vessel specific. So all the details of the vessel, niche areas of the vessel, and what we intend to do to manage biofouling on our vessels, irrespective of where it goes and when it goes. Section 3 is we just simply call it a record book, and that is in 2 basic parts. First one is what we've done, i.e. a dive inspection or applied new antifoul and the like. The other section is our ports of call list. So Auckland, Whangarei, Auckland, Tauranga, Auckland, again, down to, say, Marble Sounds off the Chatham. So it's all in chronological order with a date we've arrived at the port and the date we have left. So we have a fairly good idea what each port requires of us, although we have been tripped over a few times, but we learn from that. And so we generally know, and if we don't know, we'll call what to do, i.e. do a dive inspection. And that leads us to the difficulties that we have. So our vessels are basically 5-6 knot vessels, ablative antifoul, as previously mentioned. And our difficult areas are niche areas. For example, rope guards around propeller shafts, because rope guards hide areas where life likes to hide. So we might get a diver down there and they can see something growing, but they don't know what it is, which means they don't see it very well, but we know something's in there. So therefore we have to haul out on occasions which we haven't planned for. And as many of you, if not most of you, run a business anyway, When you plan, you can budget very well. Anything unplanned is unbudgeted, unless you have some kind of pot for that such events. And we could be looking at, say, a $10,000 lift and hold and blast to come back into our plan that we've created, enabling us to go from region to region. So that's a lot of money, you know. And even though we are dedicated to what this is all about, it's still a lot of money that you know, is a cost to the business. So as was mentioned earlier, you water blast your hull, and you're ripping away at least a year, maybe 2 years worth of antifoul. So we used to have a 5-year antifoul system, which means like 400 microns, but we've cut that down to 36-month system, 3-year system, because we now accept that we have to give it a full coat of paint every 2 to 3 years, and every 2 to 3 years is the survey schedule for a commercial vessel. So we've cut down our antifouling recoat timeline to again better meet the requirements. What we would like to see is more MPI accredited facilities around the country. There probably are more than what we know of already. We primarily are in the Tauranga, Auckland, Whangarei areas, but I'm not too sure outside of that. Yeah, okay, so I got one more note, and that is when we do take a vessel out of the water, we block it, and that is an area which doesn't get antifouled, and that's becomes a kind of like a semi-niche area, and open to quick biofouling growth. And that's problematic for us because, you know, I mentioned 10 grand for a lift and hold and wash, and then we're looking at 2 grand or even more for a dive inspection and / clean. And divers do a really good job. It's a good service for them and a good service to us, but they just like mechanically wipe away antifoul. So we have red over black antifoul, so 100 and 125 microns respectively. And when we see the black, we know that we're coming up to a new application. And
Thanks, Ian. Can you just bring it to a close now?
Yeah, okay. I've covered all the main points, so thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go to the protection systems. Good place to pick it up. And Glenn, you're going to tell us about some new innovations there, I think.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. We're Marine Protection Solutions specialised pretty much in underwater hull wraps with silicon films and paints and 2-pot paints. They're all from Europe. As everybody knows, the biocides are being removed out of the conventional antifouls as what they were many, many years ago. So that's probably playing a part too, also in the additional growth that's happening, and also probably with the warmer waters they're coming along. So the silicon films are a hydrophobic silicon. They're actually made by the paint companies, PPG. Originally International made the Intersleek 1100, and Coverplast from Italy do the 2-pot paints. So each film or 2-pot paint works in conjunction with, for each vessel they can have a different sort of, like a dry stack vessel may have the crystal paint, and generally other vessels will have the silicon films. So there's also, we've just got some trials going on with the ultrasonic out of the Netherlands. So they are the Shipsonic, which, as the last gentleman was talking about, those little niche areas, the ultrasound can go into those areas and they can be also used with conventional antifouls and as well as they can double up with the films or the paints. So it is a little bit more expensive. Most of our customers have worked out that, you know, from 3 years on, they're actually benefiting with the fuel economy. I'm actually in Australia at the moment. We've just got some new supply of different silicon films that we're just putting samples pretty much all across the seaboard of Australia, and that's the reason I'm here. But what we've seen in the results that we've had in New Zealand for the silicon films has been extremely well, worked extremely well. So, and they can also be cleaned in water. We've worked with Clean Below, good to go. And so long as the marinas have the health and safety, that's the owners can actually organise the wiping just with sponges of the hulls, or they will clean at 7 to 8 knots. But it's the same thing. If they're continually used, the hydrophobic nature of the silicon will, you know, minimize the marine growth. So that's pretty much it. That's what we do. We stay in the area of you know, biocide-free options for customers.
Great, thank you, Glenn. It's really good to hear about that. And I think Marcus will take us back to maybe some of the more traditional solutions and where that's up to. We've got Marcus still there somewhere? Oh, there he is. Away you go.
Right, so I work for Altex Coatings in recreational, commercial, marine zones. We're a New Zealand manufacturer, and so we also have technology partners out of North America, Europe, and Asia. So we're always looking to test new formulations, new types of products in the New Zealand and Australian regions. So in New Zealand, for example, we have 3 testing rafts, which are located in different parts of the country. They're managed by NIWA. On each raft, we have in excess of 700 antifoul samples at any one time. And so we're always looking at different options and different blends of biocides to increase performance. So at this stage, you know, we've all removed thyrene from our antifouls many months ago now. And we've tried some slightly different tweaks to some of the existing antifouls, which are testing so far has shown to be performing quite well. We're also looking at a slightly newer version of our commercial and recreational antifouls, which will have slightly more barnacle resistance. So that's looking promising as well. A lot of what we're doing is really working with vessel owners, and that's recreational and commercial, to try and actually get the best performance out of the systems that are there. So it's education as to choosing the right systems, because quite often people choose the wrong antifoul system for the type of vessel they have or the way that they use it. The other thing is that cost imperatives also tend to cloud people's judgment as to how antifoul should perform or what system they should be using. And often, and unfortunately, in the recreational field, people want to put the cheapest system that they can on, and then sadly a little bit surprised when it doesn't perform as well as they expected. A lot of this is down to education, which working with the Top of the South Marine Biosecurity has actually been really beneficial, because people have actually started to understand how antifoul systems work, what biofouling is, and their expectations are possibly more realistic. Quite often we find that when people have issues with the way antifoul systems are performing, it's quite often because, one, they've either chose the wrong system for their boat and how it's used, or secondly, they've actually not put enough of actual product on to give them the protection that they expected. So really, a lot of the cases, it's just trying to provide that education so that people get the best performance out of the products. So unfortunately, a lot of people have this perception that antifouls kill all biofouling. It's not the case. You know, you have to learn to live with a certain amount of fouling, particularly if you're not using your vessel very much, which is always a challenge. And I think previous speaker pointed out that a lot of vessels don't move that much, particularly in the recreational use side of things. And therefore, static protection is a higher priority than it is when they're actually moving, which is slightly different for the commercial vessels where, they're more concerned about protection while the boat's moving around the coastal waters of New Zealand rather than the shorter periods where they're tied up at the wharf. So it's a bit of a contradiction in terms of trying to use products to do two different vastly situations. So that's where we're at this point in time in the marketplace. There is always emerging new technology, and some of it has a bit of promise, but we do test very vigorously before we bring something to market. So that's years of actual environmental testing out on our rafts. We also paint test vessels across different types of usage, so that'd be recreational, semi-commercial or heavy commercial marine, and we'd be monitoring those for a number of years to check what the performance is like. So at this stage, yes, traditional antifoul systems still have a very big part to play, though that we're conscious of trying to reduce the amount of actual active materials within them, such as the cuprous oxide, so that we don't need to load them up with excessive amounts and still get the right sort of performance. In some of our products, we've changed the resin backbone, which is within the paint, so that it means that the biocides within the paint are more readily available and ablate at a more even rate, so that we don't actually have to load that paint up with so much active ingredient. It's a challenging environment out there. Water temperatures are rising, and vessel owners are obviously challenged on the budgetary side of things. It's about really providing tools that fit within reasonable sort of price brackets for them to use. That's really where we are in the market at the moment.
Great, thank you, Marcus. Really appreciate that. And so let's go to Eugene, and you can give us the helicopter view or maybe the submarine view. I'm not sure, Eugene.
Right. First of all, I'll give you a bit of a view from the EPA and what we did with our reassessments of anti-fouling paints about 10 years ago. So this, and then I'll take that, I don't know, semi-submersible view on things. So first of all, the reassessment was initiated based on new information about environmental and human health effects from substances on the market internationally. And then there was significant concerns held by Maori regarding the adverse effects that some of the biocides might be having on the Maori of aquatic ecosystems. So the decision regarding the reassessment came out in 2013, and the committee, they identified that there's still substantial benefits of using biocidal anti-fouling paints with regard to biosecurity and vessel efficiency. However, what they did find that there were still risks identified for human health and environment from the use of all anti-fouling paints on the market. So what they did was they retained some approvals of about eight or nine biocidal active ingredients, but with additional controls, and they declined the approvals of about another 6 or 7 anti-fouling biocides. And some of those were immediately declined, such as chlorothalonol and ergorol. They basically had very deleterious environmental effects. Others were, their approvals were only retained for 4 years before they were taken off the market. And Thyram, as discussed, was the approval was was retained for 10 years to help enable new products to come on the market, because that was a widely used co-biocide. So the following controls were put in place for all anti-fouling or biocidal anti-fouling paints. So applicators need personal protective equipment for both do-it-yourself people and professional persons during application and removal. The labeling of all the paints and safety data sheet requirements were also improved to help understand with the practices of all users. And also work area signage needed to be put in place, but also the mandatory collection of contaminated waste from all maintenance activities. Importantly, the decision-making committee made the following recommendations. So it was to basically, like, understanding that there were still benefits of biocidal paints, but to undertake or encourage further research on safer alternatives to the current biocidal anti-fouling paints that are currently on the market. And that could include non-biocidal alternatives or less toxic biocides as well. So in terms of a helicopter view, this is a hugely difficult problem. Marine biofouling and non-Indigenous species spread by shipping in general and recreational vessels in general is a really difficult problem. And then you sort of got to look at it in terms of the type of approach that you're taking. Are you taking a zero risk approach, which basically means that you can't move any vessels anywhere, or do you take a risk minimization approach where there's always going to be some fouling associated with a vessel? And this is getting back to what Ian's talking about with the niche areas that are particularly hard to limit fouling on. It's not impossible, but it's extremely hard. And there are some areas that you can't use some systems on. So then you've got to sort of say, okay, well, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve good practice? So if you're trying to achieve good practice, then you have your good biofouling management plans, your good record books, your inspections in appropriate times. And what are your contingency plans like when your vessels are laid up and things? And are you following those contingency plans through? And if someone's doing that, then is it the right thing to sort of penalize a good player like that if they've got marginal fouling on their vessel? Or, do you basically say this person has done the right thing? A lot of it with the anti-fouling comes down to choice, as what Marcus was saying, and Glenn as well. It's choosing the right anti-fouling paint for the operational profile of your vessel. And with that also comes, in terms of ongoing maintenance of that paint, is like you need to talk to the manufacturer about, if you're going to, clean off your slime layer intermittently and things like that, then what technology should you use to do that so you're not depleting the biocide within your paint, or scraping off the silicon or damaging the silicon of your paint as well. So there really needs to be conversations between the vessel owners and the paint manufacturers and the manufacturers of marine growth prevention systems as well. Haul out facilities is, that's been an issue for a while. Yeah, but I think, like, in terms of Nigel's issues with vessels just sitting there in one place and gathering fouling, is that's the type of problem you're going to have where you're going to end up with paint depletion, because you have to apply a much harsher method to remove that fouling from your coating. So you're better off trying to maintain your vessel at at a slime layer approach, so you're using a softer proactive management rather than a harsher reactive management, which is going to deplete your coating over time and may damage your coating as well.
Eugene, could I just ask you to wrap up at that point?
Oh, I'm pretty much done.
Right.
All good.
Thank you. And thanks for providing a bit more of an overview, gave you a bit more time there. I'd like to just come back to just where you stopped, actually, and pick this up, the suggestion right at the beginning, 6 and 1, has it had its day? Have we got the rule settings right? And can we make better use of our infrastructure? Panelists, what do you reckon? Who'd like to go first? Nigel, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I can, sure, but the 6 and 1 we're not using so much down south here on the top of the south. It's something we've been looking at with interest, particularly in what's happening up in the top of the north. It is a concern for my customers in terms of what that would mean for Nelson. For those who don't know, we're within 3 different councils here, and Nelson actually doesn't have any cruising grounds really within our area. We need to move to Tasman District Council, which is the Able Tasman National Park, or we're going into Marlborough District Council to go into the Marlborough Sounds as our 2 cruising grounds. So 6 and 1 would be very prohibitive. If it came from council to council in terms of the zoning rather than top of the south, that would be very prohibitive for us. But at the same time, we're also very concerned of those that are coming into our region, particularly out of Wellington, where Wellington's having some pretty big issues now with Calliope and other invasive species, and are they going to bring those into the Marlborough Sounds, and do we want those protected under the 6 and 1 to look after our region? So it's a bit of a hard one to protect us from outside. The 6 and 1 seems good, but can we actually make the 6 and 1 work in the top of the south with our cruising grounds? I'm not too sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other views there from the panel? And I guess the other half of my question was, you know, I think you said at the beginning, Mark, you really don't have a problem with the provision of facilities, but a problem with seasonality. And Nigel mentioned that it might be brought into the Marina berth agreement to maybe have a co-pay, and would that allow you to schedule things on a yearly basis that actually work better? What do you think, Mark?
Well, my own thoughts are it depends. It depends on marina to marina, really. What we found is when they did all the studies here last year, they only actually out of 600 boats found 34 with any fouling that they were concerned about for our marina. We actually find, because we have a boatyard on site, we have plenty of capacity. The boat owners that regularly use their boats are doing maintenance. I mean, the problem is more the moored boats, and that's come up time and time again. The people that regularly use their boats every year, they do the maintenance anyway. It's the ones that don't get used, which is Nigel's talking about, that are sitting there. And to be quite honest, those boats aren't going to go from region to region without doing any maintenance. I mean, you can't take a boat, say, from here up to Opua if it's got a whole lot of growth on it. You're not going to get past Rangi Light before the thing overheats, probably. You know, so the stuff that is going up between the regions, I would say 98%, if not 100% of it, is actually clean. So we're actually chasing shadows, if you like, of boats that are already complying. So from that perspective, I don't know that 6 and 1 is actually really doing anything. It's interesting, as I said, the Northern Regional Council, their guidance now is for boats going into their region, it's just that it has to have no more than a slime layer, and that they will fine you if they come and check your boat. So if you haven't gone into a marina, there is no need for you to comply with 6 and 1, is the way that the Regional Council have their website now. They're saying you only need to comply with 6 and 1 if you're going to a marina, and make the marinas look like the villains that are demanding it. So I'm not quite sure how we get to this point. It's certainly a change I'd not picked up before I did some research before coming on here. So I don't know if anyone else is able to comment on that. I'm interested to see why it's got to be in that point. Okay,
so thanks, Mark. Let's pick it up with Zoe, because I think you've got some questions coming through there that are relevant. And you're muted, Zoe.
I think it was really just around clarifying that 6 and 1 rule, and I was really interested to hear Mark's requirements on that. And I'm not sure that there's anyone here from Northland. They're busy dealing with Calliope who could address it. But the 6 and 1 rule is a little stricter than the council rules, definitely in the North Island, in the Upper North Island, the councils that have rules around biofouling. The rule is around the level of fouling on your boat. It's not around when your boat was cleaned or anti-fouled. So these are some sort of additional protections that some marinas, not all marinas, have put in place, including the ones in Auckland. But my understanding is it's not driven by council. It may have been originally, but it's not now. And if someone like Dylan was from Tutakaka Marina was here, he'd speak very passionately about why it's necessary to protect the poor nights from fan worm, and he's got some really good reasons for that. But I don't think if there's anything in our communications that seems like it's villainising marinas for applying that rule, I'd really like to address that. So I'll take that up with Mark.
Great,
and try and readdress that balance, because that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, and I guess this is a thing for everybody staying up with changing technologies, is that certainly when we're inspecting vessels here, we're seeing some with 10-year systems that are still doing fine, and some that after 6 months, it's a pretty hopeless job. And I did see in the chat there was a bit of a question about how much is it the responsibility of the owner and how much the responsibility of the industry to have systems that work, and some skepticism about some of the current systems. And I've certainly heard around the traps, it's because Eugene, EPA took all the good stuff out. Bring back the TBT, they say. Yeah, I guess it'd be really interesting to hear from those who are on the sort of anti-fouling side about how they'd respond to that, to say, well, you know, your products don't work as directed. What's the story?
Glenn here from Marine Protection Solutions. Like I said before, each boat has its own real specified requirement. The films, the two-pot paints, 100% biocide free. So therefore, there is maintenance required. If the boats are used regularly, if they're going to sit in one place for 6 months, they'll might need a couple of wipes. The two-pot paints in Europe, they're generally using those with the ultrasound units, the H2O sonic shield, and the sonic shield's also working with more the hard antifouls rather than the ablative, because you can still wipe or pick off any barnacle or anything off a hard antifoul as opposed to an ablative antifoul. So for the owners, it's about the maintenance of a boat. There's always maintenance in a boat. So
thanks, Glenn. I'll go to Marcus and then come to Eugene. There seems to be some interest in this topic.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, and it crops up on a regular basis. And I've been and looked at vessels that have had problems where performance has not been what the owners expected. In a large portion of the cases, unfortunately, it was quite often it's the wrong anti-foul system has been chosen for the type of use the boat's having. So, for instance, putting a hard anti-foul on a boat that traditionally sits in a marina and only gets used once or twice a year is probably not a good fit in terms of system. The other thing is that a lot of anti-foul performance problems come back to a couple of other reasons. One is poor preparation of the underlying surfaces. So, in other words, if the work underneath the anti-fouling is not done very well, the anti-fouling itself will not perform very well. You'll have delamination, or you'll have pinhole voids in the coatings, which are typically places where barnacles like to exploit. So they'll find any opening in the anti-foul and they'll drill their way in and they'll make themselves at home. The other thing is quite often is in these sorts of situations, I'll go and look at a vessel and I'll question the owner and I'll figure out how much anti-foul they actually applied to the boat. And in most cases, it's just not enough. And quite often I've found people have been expecting, 24 months effective service in the water, yet the amount of anti-foul they've put on would barely be enough to sort of go 8-10 months. And I can understand why they might do that, because it's an expensive exercise for them, but it produces poor value because they get poor performance out of it, and then they're having to haul their boat again sooner than they expected. Boats are expensive holes in the ocean that people throw money into. But by not putting enough anti-foul on, you just won't get the system to perform the way you expect it.
Great, thanks, Marcus. Eugene.
Yeah, just to reiterate from what Marcus and Glenn were saying, it's so important to be talking to the manufacturer to line up your use profile of the vessel with the appropriate anti-fouling paint. And then to go back to what Marcus was saying, it's the preparation and the application of the paint, which is really important. So just to emphasize those points as well.
Thanks, Eugene. Ian.
Yeah, just quickly, we also increase the frequency of blasting our hulls right back to the bare metal So the new antifoul is nice and smooth, reducing the little nooks and crannies on the actual hull. That's point one. Point two is the little I know about the 6-in-1. It looks like a refined version or broken down version of our commercial biofoul management plan that we operate. So it does take good management to make it work. Thank you.
Yeah, and I reckon, Ian, that it'd be good for, just putting my top of the South coordinator's hat on, it'd be great for us to take this up with the Marina Owners Association, who are passionate, but we can probably, get some clarity around this. And Nigel, I think you were going to maybe say something about that.
Well, what I was looking at more was, and it's something that Ian mentioned before as well, with the blocking of vessels. And one of the issues we're having as boatyards and marinas is those areas where the vessel sits when it's out of the water and the bottom of the keels and where it's blocked, is how do we get the application of the antifoul into those areas? Now that can be done with an extra lift and moving the vessel, but that then incurs a much more significant cost. So you might do another lift. That might cost the customer another $500 to lift and be sitting in the slings to then paint under the keel or under the keel sim or under the keel of the yacht. So that's something we need to think about as well when we're looking at how do we, well, I guess the cost of the entire anti-fouling program, because it's not just the paint, it's the labour and the lifting of the vessels. And we need to sort of address that as well. And that also then later affects the amount of the capacity that our yards can handle if we're having to lift every boat twice to do a anti-foul application. So it's just something else to bear in mind really as we go through this process. And I know from my experience, and I know from yours as well, Peter, that's where we're finding a lot of those issues, a lot of the pests. It is in those areas that might get one lick of paint when the boat's lifted half an hour before it's put in the water.
Great, thanks, Nigel. And Ollie. There you go.
Yeah, just briefly also picking up on the anti-fouling side of things, and just to acknowledge and agree with what has been said by several people earlier on about the importance of, choosing the right product, applying it the right way, and maintaining it the right way, including, the way it's intended to be used, or in relation to your vessel's, usage profile. That has a huge bearing on how well they work, is how I understand it as well. I just want to say that, more than a decade ago in 2011, the New Zealand and Australian central governments both funded the development of what ended up becoming the in-water cleaning and anti-fouling guidelines for Australia and New Zealand. That was a almost one-year project that involved an advisory group of 30 people that included the anti-fouling coating industry, the ports and marina industries, New Zealand councils and central government, and the same for Australia. And it was a great discussion, and it was a difficult process, but it ended up in the development of sort of best practice that included already multiple pages on the importance of exactly those things regarding anti-fouling product choice, application, etc. And that was over 10 years ago, and it is in some way a shame that that sort of fell by the wayside, and that could have been picked up more by regions and government, and started this dialogue a long time ago already, and reached and probably result and would have achieved a lot better education by now than there is with regard to product choice and application. And so it's just a reflection really that resource is still available, but it's a shame that it's never really seen the light of day and become used to the extent that it could have been.
Thanks, Ollie. Our time's up for the panel discussion. I want to just bring you back in, Zoe. Just any summing up comments and advertising what's happening in the last of the 3 webinars.
Yeah, so I think it would be great to have a conversation with some of you about how we can get boaties to do more maintenance over winter. That really seems like a big one, and I hear the industry saying, please, can we do it? And the boat owners are reluctant for different reasons, and they have some good reasons for that. So think that might be it might be a good topic for a future conversation. But we do have another webinar next week. It's the third and final in this series, and it's really aimed to be the sharing of knowledge between those in councils and government teams that are working on marine security, just to share their experience with those who are newer to it.
Right, but it's an open discussion where anybody can come into it, hear what the regulators are talking about.
Mm.
Great, well, thank you, and thank you very much to our panel. I've learned a lot this morning, and it's really great to see all these people. 13 years ago it felt a bit lonely in marine biosecurity, and now you're all here. It's really fantastic. So thank you. And as Zoe indicated, we'll be here after 11, just for anybody that wanted to talk about anything else with us. We'll open it up and we'll have a chat, and we'll just see when that finishes. So thank you, and we'll hope to see some of you next week.
Thank you, Peter. Take care.
Yes, thanks for the invite.
Thanks for hosting us.
It's all good. You're a great group.